Welcome, everybody. So my name's John Mudd. I'm chairing this meeting today. If there's anything that goes wrong or haywire, somebody jumps in, they're not supposed to, and if it goes out, just jump right back on. We'll close it out and we'll jump right back on. This meeting is recorded, and please email any subject matter that you want to speak to to add on to the agenda. So we're here, attendees, speakers, we're all here to kind of gather knowledge and ideas and resources and to help find a solution. So everybody's friends here, okay? It's a conversational meeting, and then we want to keep it that way. The policy meeting, we just had a policy meeting. We just talked about Charisma's problem, and I'll recap it, and Charisma can fill in where I might have missed something. Basically, the human rights, apparently, when they were fully staffed, they had 6 lawyers. They're down to 1. Neighborhoods Together put out a statement about they need 1 billion, and they need it to be fully funded. Charisma was upgraded to a 2-bedroom voucher. She's in a building that they don't really keep it maintained very well, and there's 110 violations on that building. She has some problems getting into some of these new developments, especially the ones with the 421A tax credit, and we're going to have a discussion about that today. She's let's see, she's having definitely some trouble with the landlord. She's been in touch with the Neighborhoods Together. They've talked to the DHCR, and she's her lawyer at the Human Rights Division is leaving. That's Juliet. We've had her here to speak, and so I think that could be an action for a committee action that we could develop, about the funding, help support push the funding idea. So we're going to put that maybe perhaps on next month's agenda. Charisma, did I miss anything?
No, you got everything right.
Okay, very good. Let's see. Special introductions. Let's run through the special introductions before we get to our main speakers. Any elected officials here today? Okay. Daniel Pinchinson, are you here on? Okay. He was here earlier. Maybe he's late getting back. Housing Works, anybody from Housing Works? I see Rue on the phone. We'll go back to him. Any Robert Seebeck?
Yep. Hi, John. Should I just give some updates now?
Sure. Introduce yourself and
Okay.
Go ahead and speak.
Yeah. So my name is Robert Seebeck. I graduated from the New School Public and Urban Policy program this past December. I'm doing a research fellowship for the Fund for the City of New York, and I'm working with Manhattan Community Board 5 with Marissa Mack, the district manager, and I'm providing an inventory analysis of all the housing and social services in Manhattan Community Ward 5. And I'm presenting tomorrow at CB5's offices to Marissa, Renee, and a few others in the office. And yeah, basically I just want to provide some main points from all the research I've done about housing and social services in CB5. So yeah, it'd be good just to get kind of a gut check of how these numbers sound to you, and you think I'm missing anything. So basically I found about 1,500 total supportive housing beds. And these are mainly in 3 locations: Times Square Hotel, Prince George, and Friend's House. I heard that Breaking Ground is working on a 4th supportive housing location right now. And then I have a few religious sites such as St. Francis and Xavier Mission. I only found 2 shelters in the area, Main Chance Drop-In Center and Urban Pathways, about 23 hotels, and then a lot of social services where Medicaid's accepted and walk-ins available. And then also John gave me his street sheets. I don't know if anyone has seen his street sheets, but this helped to find all like the public bathroom locations and places where food is served. And so I'm going to recommend that CB5 helps advocate for more supportive housing, and also maybe try to find some places where more public bathrooms and food can be served in CB5. Yeah, that's pretty much my update. It'd be helpful if anyone has any ideas for me.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Robert, you're specifically looking in the area of CB5?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So yeah. And you'll have your report available to this committee and for other people?
Yeah, probably. I'm going to talk to Marissa about that, but most likely we'll be able to share it. And I have like a series of maps basically of where, like a resource map essentially. Yeah.
Good. That would be good. Yeah, maybe we can even add it to our websites, and we'll be happy to do that. Any questions for Robert? Okay, thanks for that, and thanks for your hard work. I know you've been working on it for a while.
Yep. Thank you, John.
Yeah, you're quite welcome. Thanks for being here. Okay, let's get back to the agenda. Rue, are you available? Yeah.
I am. I am so sorry.
Hey, that's okay.
Our community update just went out, and when it does, I get call after call for the next 2 days, it seems like. So I'm Rue, Executive Director and founder of Help NYC. And for those who are new to the call, we verify and list low barrier services across the city, and those services are available at helpnyc.info. Our community update, as I just mentioned, just went out, and we are currently doing a landlords and realtors initiative, which is kind of morphing into, we're playing the role of sharing information about the vouchers and bringing organizations together that are working with currently unhoused people and those in emergency housing to find realtors and landlords that have units available. We're also in contact with the mayor's engagement unit, public engagement unit, and talking with them about what they're working on. Currently, we are meeting every other week, and anyone who is working on getting people with vouchers or has information is welcome to our meetings. Please email me if you'd like to be invited to those meetings. Currently, we have Neighbors Together, Interfaith Assembly on Homelessness and Housing, Unlock NYC, and a couple realtors that are joining us for those meetings. The Community Speaks survey, our partnership with with Columbia University and their Community Speaks project, just released their first policy briefing on the effects of COVID on families with children. Their surveys pick up the information that the governments don't pick up in their data sets. And they're launching their next round of surveys April 15th. If you would like to partner with them to get the information out to your constituents, program participants, patients, please let me know and I will connect you with their team. We really need representation from people of color in the outer boroughs, specifically API and Asians, and also Black families. We are now listing community fridges at helpnyc.info. So if you have a community fridge in your neighborhood, please let me know. I'll put the link to where you can suggest the listing in the chat. This is a very excited thing. We had to wait until the community fridges stabilized in the city because they come and go. But we found that a lot of community fridges are staying around now and are being stocked weekly. Our Help NYC street sheets will come out in July. If you would like to receive a drop shipment of street sheets, please let me know. And also, if you have a food assistance program and would like us to send volunteers to help you pack bags in exchange for allowing us to put flyers into your bags, please let me know. We're scheduling people for May and June right now. And I also would like to thank our listing partners that are on the call, Daniel and his team at Chelsea Clinton, we are onboarding their clinics currently this week to our resource navigator. And Housing Works, if you're here, I don't see anyone from Housing Works here. And that's our report. Thank you for allowing me to give you our updates.
Very glad, always glad to have you. Thanks for your hard work. Okay, let's see who else we have. Lisa's not here today. Derwin from Core Recovery, are you here? Gilbert Soto? Okay, any new members? I'm sorry, go ahead.
John, it's Dan. I joined a little bit late. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay.
Just a quick update from a health perspective in the neighborhood. We are seeing an uptick in COVID cases at the health center. People are in vaccinated and boosted individuals. It seems that this latest variant, the BA.2 that you might have heard about in the media, if you had COVID 2 years ago, and even if you're boosted, the cases are mild-ish, though, you know, people who have comorbid conditions or need to be careful. So, and we're also noticing is that like a lot of people have access, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but many people have access to rapid tests. So then they're not getting PCR tested, and then it doesn't get reported to the city. So some of the public numbers are probably, there's an undercount in terms of positivity. So we just want everybody themselves and to tell your neighbors and community members to continue to wear masks as much as possible and get as much as vaccine as you're eligible for, as we do see an uptick at the center and in the neighborhood. That's it.
Great, thanks, Dan. Thanks so much. Okay, let's move on. Okay, it's adaptive reuse. If you missed the forum, you could review it on YouTube. Is Ted around? Is Ted, are you on this? Ted's is from Gateway Housing. He's been working on trying to make some deals, adapting hotels into housing. We're looking at something that we may be able to adapt to a medical respite bed, and we're trying to move that meeting forward and see where we can go with that. Okay, let's get to the 421A. Well, that might be a longer conversation. Layla, you want to give a quick update on the Empire? I'm sorry, I'm going to just go out of order here just for a quick second, because Layla's will be short, and then I think the whole meeting might be about the 421A tax, and I want to give a lot of time to that. Layla, you want to?
Sure. Very briefly, not much to report, other than to say that the review process for the ESD plan to redevelop 10 towers around Penn Station is still progressing with ESD, the Empire State Development Corporation. Not much has happened. Our understanding is that they are at work preparing the final environmental impact statement. We understand that this could be released in summer, although we don't have an exact date. There has been a number of letters that have been penned by state senators, including Liz Krueger and Brad Holman, raising grave concerns about the project. And we're, in a more of a wait and see type of position at the moment.
Yeah, we have, I think 15 had signed on, right?
That's correct. Yes. The entire New York City Senate delegation signed on to a letter asking the governor to hold the project.
Yeah, they seem to be bent on pushing this project through. We've been doing a lot of work in this area because it's going to squash a lot of affordable housing. Longtime tenants are going to create havoc, and we were, correct me if I'm wrong, but we were already 20% down prior to COVID with vacancy, commercial vacancy in that area. And what happened was a lot of those commercial tenants went over the Hudson Yards, so now they want to build a river-to-river commercial district while we need housing. Is that
Absolutely.
pretty much?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think this is a fight that everybody needs to get in on. And speaking to that, we're working on a rally highlighting that location, as well as the Hudson Yards, as well as the NYCHA residents in the Midtown area. They all tell an individual story, but yet they tell a bigger story. And that's
Yes,
what we want to put out
absolutely.
there. So, and you'll hear more about the rally as we, as it develops. Okay. Any questions for Layla at all? Okay, so we're going to go right to the 421A. We have a special guest here. He was with the Community Service Society. He did a study or a proposal or research. Samuel, you can speak to that a little bit better than I can. He's been around. He's I'm really happy to have Samuel Stein. Samuel, you want to?
Thanks, John.
Okay.
Thanks for having me. My name is Sam Stein. I'm a Hell's Kitchen resident. I work at the Community Service Society of New York as a housing policy analyst. And in that position, I've been researching 421A, and we have recently published a kind of major report in 2 parts. I'm going to put the links in the chat right now, if anybody wants to read in full, but I'm going to summarize some of the findings right now. And then I think we'll hear from folks at housing conservation coordinators about some of the local dynamics and political fight. If I can share my screen.
Sure, I can take care of that. Let me just find your name. There we are, more. And you're a co-host, and you should be able to share.
I got it. All right, one sec. Okay, do you all see the PowerPoint?
Mm-hmm.
So these are the covers of the 2 reports that I mentioned, which are available online at the links that I put in the chat. They are looking at 421A at 50. The program started in 1971, turned 50 years old last year, and is set to expire in June of 2022 unless it's renewed or replaced. So for the uninitiated, what is 421A? 421A is state law that applies to New York City. It is a gigantic tax break for new housing development. It is available as of right, so developers don't have to show that they need the tax break to build the housing. It's just there for them to access. The majority of the housing that it produces, the large majority, is market rate. As the program is written, 70 to 75% of the units are market rate. Since 2016, those new market rate units, if they're coming in above $2,800, are not rent stabilized. So they're just fully unregulated market housing. The other 25 to 30% is income targeted. In most neighborhoods in New York City, however, that income targeted housing is so expensive that it is at or even sometimes above market rate. So even the affordable housing is market rate in most of New York City. In the Hell's Kitchen, Chelsea, Hudson Yards area, the affordable housing is less than market rate, but still more than most residents could afford. And I'll get into that a little bit more. The tax break can last as long as 35 years. So in other words, 421A benefits that are accessed in 2022 will still not be paying taxes in 2057. I'm not going to go through the entire history of 421A, but we have a timeline and a history in the first of the 2 reports. The most salient fact here is that the program was created in 1971 at a time when the city and state government decided they really needed a major incentive to get developers to build housing, and especially rental housing, in New York City. The primary concern was not affordability or gentrification. It was disinvestment and capital flight. That looks not a lot like the housing and real estate market of 2022. The program has been changed a bit over the years at each of these stops along the way, adding that affordability component that I talked about, which has also changed over the years, but the core of it remains the same. It is a 100% property tax exemption on new buildings for decades on end. In 2021, fiscal year 2021, 421A cost the city of New York $1.7 billion in uncollected property tax revenue. Going back from the years 1990 to 2021, which is as much public data as the Department of Finance makes available, New York City has foregone more than $22 billion adjusted for inflation, $22 billion in uncollected property tax revenue from 1990 to 2021. The cost of the program has also gone up tremendously year to year. So the program was at its lowest point in 1999. Between 1999 and 2021, the program's price to the city in terms of uncollected tax revenue increased by over 1,000%. That is as a result of increased development, as a result of increased property values, and as a result of longer 421A tax exemption, so it stays on the books for longer. As of this past year, over 92% of the newest 421A exemptions are lasting for 35 years. So almost all of them will be on the books until 35 years from the time the building was built. We spend more in terms of uncollected property tax revenue on 421A than on any other single expense in our housing budget. $1.7 billion in uncollected tax revenue is more than we spend on HPD's capital budget. It's more than we spend on Section 8 vouchers. It's more than the federal government spends on NYCHA annual costs. It's more than all of these costs. It's not more than all of them combined. It's not more than many of them combined, but it is the single largest budget expenditure on housing in New York City. And yet, as I said, it is primarily financing market rate, not rent stabilized housing. There are, of course, defenders of 421A, primarily in the real estate industry, also sometimes in labor unions. And I used to work in labor unions before I worked in the housing movement. So how do they defend it? Well, first they say 421A is an affordable housing program. You know, you are the community service society. Don't you like affordable housing? Well, it hasn't really been producing affordable housing, even in its latest form, which requires affordable housing on site. It produced 0 units of extremely low income housing. Just 3% of the units were very low income housing. 4% were low income, and the vast majority were middle income, 130% AMI apartments, which, like I said, is more than most tenants can afford by far, and in many neighborhoods is at or above market rent. So they also say land is too expensive in New York. Without 421A, developers wouldn't even build market rate rental housing. This is interesting because it's a problem that 421A arguably has made worse. You could make the argument that adding more housing has brought down rental costs, but having this de facto as of right tax break has raised the price of land in New York. And this is a diagram where we explain why that is. And again, I'm not going to read every piece of this, it's all in the report, but the core of the argument is when this extremely lucrative tax break is available to developers, landowners know that, and they price in some of that benefit into the sale price of developable land or buildings that can be torn down and replaced. And so the developer pays more to access the land. They then take out bigger loans from their investors and their banks, and then they set higher rental and condo sale prices to pay back those levels of debt. So in the end, the very easy availability of this tax break can raise the price of land. And so the ultimate beneficiary is a kind of speculative landholder, not the tenants of New York City. This one is real. Real estate folks and defenders of 421A will say ending 421A today won't put $1.7 billion into next year's budget. So that's true. And that's true because we have already committed to not collecting tax revenue for decades on end to buildings that already received 421A. So it would take a while for the city to recoup all the lost tax revenue. But that's not really an argument to keep giving away the tax money. You know, it's an argument to stop it now, to stop the bleeding, so that we don't, spend $1.9 billion next year and fully $2 billion the year after that, and just keep escalating without getting a huge amount of return in terms of affordable housing. This is a chart showing the rising cost of 421A over the last several decades. It's really tremendous. So our organization has for a long time said we should end 421A, not because it's too expensive. We should be spending a lot of money on new housing development, and not because it subsidizes new and tall buildings. We have no preference for old or small buildings over new and tall ones. It's that it's subsidizing the wrong kind of housing. It's not producing the kind of housing we need to solve our homelessness and housing affordability crises. If it is thought of as an affordable housing crisis, an affordable housing program, 421A is extremely inefficient. For the amount of money that we lose in 421A, we could be directly financing dozens of times more truly affordable housing. Given that this is a tax exemption on an entire building, only a small percentage of which is truly affordable, it's a major loss for not a lot of gain. And finally, it locks in austerity politics. And by that, I mean, the city and state can always say, I'm sorry, we don't have enough money to spend on fixing up NYCHA, on vouchers for the homeless, on new housing construction that's truly affordable. But meanwhile, we're failing to collect $2 billion in tax revenue every year because of 421A. So that's my case for the system as it is. That's a summary of our findings. For the full reports, check those links that I put in the chat, and I will pass now to housing conservation coordinators to talk about some of the political and local landscape.
Excellent, Samuel. We'll have questions, I'm sure. Who do we have with the housing conservation coordinators? Elise?
Hi there.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Elise. I'm with Housing Conservation Coordinators. I'm a tenant organizer. Thanks so much, Sam, for that awesome presentation. And I'll just talk a little bit about what that has meant for our neighborhood and how we're trying to fix it. So I know we've talked a lot about kind of the big picture of it. The smaller picture in terms of Midtown is that we have so many of these buildings, and we have a ton of tenants who are in some of the older 421A buildings where their affordability may be expiring. Sorry, 1 second. And folks are getting really confusing information about whether or not they're able to keep their housing. So one thing that we are working on is stopping this misinformation that tenants are getting. Tenants are getting lease riders from their landlords saying that their affordability is expiring when they're actually referring to the market rate units. And that's causing folks to self-evict. So on a local level, we're working to pass legislation that would fine landlords for providing these misleading lease riders. And that is currently with Assemblymember Linda Rosenthal and Brad Hoylman, and we're hoping to pass it this year. So we would love your support on that. If anyone wants to be more involved, we think it's an extremely important piece of legislation because not only do we have this issue of, this not creating enough affordable housing, it's not sustainable affordable housing. It's housing that, folks constantly feel like they're going to lose. So that's one of the key issues that we're working on right now. Another piece that we're working on is a piece of legislation that would keep all of the affordable units rent stabilized in perpetuity. And And that's a bigger push, and we are hoping to get it this year, but if not this year, in the future. And so the idea with that would be that none of these units that are deemed affordable, which, as we've talked about, is still generally not affordable enough, would ever lose their affordability. There's no reason why we should be paying to create temporary affordable housing so that we can have permanent market rate. That doesn't make any sense. So those are the big things that we're trying to push right now. And then I think in terms of future things to look out for, we really want to also stop developers from being able to double dip into programs. So a lot of times you'll see the same big developer having a building that has LIHTC and 421A, LIHTC being for the low income housing tax credit, and inclusionary housing, all layered on top of each other, being counted towards the same units. So that's not very much affordable housing for a lot of tax breaks. So that's something to look out for in the future that we really want to mobilize folks around. And the way that we're trying to get this to happen is by bringing together folks from across our neighborhood, across the city, who are tenants in these buildings, to work with us and work with their legislators to pass these pieces of legislation. So if you are in one of these units, someone in one of these units, and you'd like to get involved in the campaign, please reach out to me. I'm going to drop my info in the chat. And yeah, I think that's kind of where we are right now. And really, we'll also be wanting folks who, are just want to work in solidarity, just call their legislators and say that you support this legislation. And I think just to wrap up, our core demands, right, are to protect the tenants who already live in the affordable housing units here, and also get rid of this program so that we can have actually affordable housing moving forward. And I think sometimes that sounds like, how can you want to keep something in 421A and get rid of the program altogether? But it's not that we want to keep 421A, it's that we want to protect any tenant in affordable housing, and then we want to ensure that we build actually affordable housing for the city moving forward. And if anyone has any questions or wants to talk more, you're totally welcome to reach out to me. And I also just want to open up, I know one of our members, Alex Young, is here, so if he has anything he'd like to add in, that would be awesome.
Alex?
Hi, thanks, John. Thanks, Elise. Thanks, everybody, for being here. So I'm Alex. I'm with the West Side Neighborhood Alliance, which is an offshoot of HCC, Elise's organization. So some of the, I guess, more obscure nuances of 421A are something that I like to research, and Elise is very appreciative of me when I do that. So I wanted to expand on something Sam said about the quote unquote affordable units often being pricier than the market rate units. So if you subscribe to Housing Connect, which is a email blast by HPD, so I subscribe to it mostly for research purposes. And I don't know if you can see my screen, but one building that's 3 blocks away from me.
Alex, do you want to, I can give you sharing capabilities. You want to?
Yeah, that would be great. It'll only take 2 minutes anyway. So
sure.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm gonna make you a co-host, so you should be able to share right now.
Okay, let's try this. Okay, can you see where it says Avalon Midtown West?
Yes.
Okay, so that building is 3 blocks away from me, also on Community Board 5. And Housing Connect is an email blast which shows apartment hunters what's quote unquote affordable. And as you can see where it says income levels desired, 73,000 is like the floor. So like, I don't know if anybody on this Zoom thinks that's affordable. I do not. The 28 units that were opened up were because the landlord opted into what's known as the 421A-17 extension. So that's why 28 units represents 5% of the total amount of units in the Avalon Midtown West. But I guess the really salient thing is that $73,303. Like, come on, that's, and this is like, I would say, typical of what's been happening now, as Sam mentioned in his presentation. So that's what I want to show you. Oh, and to prove that it's part of the 421A extension, just click on the orange button that says find out more. And then it gives the details. Oh yeah, here it is. This building has received a tax exemption through the 421A 17 extended tax incentive program of HPD. So that's what I wanted to
And they call
share.
it affordable housing. That's the title. Yeah. It's the same thing with Blue Slip. The 80, I think the bottom income level is 83 to 183. And so they're asking you to double up in a studio for the lower income level and triple and quadruple up in a 1-bedroom. Yeah, it's not affordable. It's your city employees, your DAs, your police officers, their starting salary is $47,000. So it doesn't help anyone. Thanks, Alex. Anything else, Alex?
No, I just wanted to double down on the working group that Elise mentioned, which meets on the third Tuesday of every month at 6:30 p.m. And you saw Elise put their email in the chat. So email if you want to join.
Okay, let's have some questions. Wonderful. Thanks to all three of you. It's wonderful. Great PowerPoint. I hope, Samuel, you make that available to everyone. Great research. We've been in this fight for a bit, but am I correct if I say this is, by the way, when someone wrote this whole 421A, I'm guessing developers have had a hand into helping to write that. Could I be wrong? Does anybody have any information to that?
You could not be wrong. I mean,
so
they don't write massive tax breaks for developers without developers.
Yeah. So it's safe to say this is a scam to fill the pockets of to fill the developers' pockets, and we really have to be behind this and fight hard about with this, right? That's okay.
Yeah.
I knew I was right. I've been with you guys, Lise and Alex, and we've talked about this, and I'm glad to have you here. So can I get someone to watch the chat and pull out questions? Alan, can you help with that? Would you mind?
And as we do, I'll just reiterate, the problem is not the building of new housing. The problem is giving a 100% multi-decade tax exemption for almost no public benefit.
Yeah, they did that with the Hudson Yards, and they want to do that with the Penn Station expansion. They want to tie in the development there. Vernado would get most of that tax break. Alan, are you still on? Did you disappear when I asked you to take the chat?
Thanks for volunteering me.
Okay.
Basically comments on the building in Avalon, and but no real questions. Some back and forth, I think, just some information going back and forth.
Okay. All right. So anybody, I know we have some questions from the participants. Anybody want to start?
There actually is a question in the chat from Miriam. I've wondered how long the wait lists are, even if it's realistic wait time, 5 years, 10 years. And Alex, I actually responded over 50 years.
Yeah, that alludes to the age of the 421A program, which Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, it launched in 1971 when New York City was a very different, place, and the landscape was different. But as far as the waiting list, I don't think there is a definitive answer. That email blast called Housing Connect, which is run by HPD, it never really says. So that's the non-answer that I have for you.
And if I can give a second non-answer, there are long waiting lists for many types of affordable housing, but generally not for this 130% AMI affordable housing, because people who make that much money can often find cheaper housing without having to do that. If they really want to be in a brand new building, they might be willing to pay a little bit more. But from my experience talking with HPD folks who are in charge of matching people, those are the hardest ones to fill. And yet that's 75% of the affordable housing that 421A has produced over the last 5 years.
Could you re-summarize that?
Yes, the longest waiting lists are for the truly affordable units. The shortest waiting lists are for the upper income units, because people who make enough money to qualify for these 130% AMI units often don't want to pay that much money in rent every month and would rather buy and pay into a mortgage, or B, can find cheaper housing than that on the market already and can afford it. And so people at HPD are charged with finding these kind of unicorn clients who make a lot of money but don't look on StreetEasy to realize that there's cheaper apartments available nearby. Okay. The good thing that can happen is people with vouchers are often put into those extremely expensive apartments that nobody who income qualifies will take. But then we have to ask ourselves, why is the building getting a full tax exemption if the housing is being paid for by the voucher, not the tax exemption? So it's like, it's a good outcome for the public. Somebody who is low income is accessing this housing that wasn't, set aside exactly for them. But you have to wonder, did we need 421A and the almost $2 billion it cost the city to achieve that goal?
Mm-hmm.
John, Layla has her hand up, and something we learned last meeting or 2 meetings ago is about the housing vouchers, that if the number on the housing voucher, the amount allowed is different than the price of the apartment, then the housing voucher doesn't work. That I found to be quite bizarre.
Mm-hmm. Layla, you want to comment?
Yeah, I actually have 2 questions for Samuel and for Elise. Wonderful report. It's really super helpful to have all this data. My 2 questions are, the first one maybe for Elise on the 485W, which is the rebranding of the 421A by the governor. It is in the budget. We still don't have a budget, but it is likely that, by tonight or tomorrow, we will have a budget. What is the likelihood that 421A morphs into this new code rather than expiring?
Thanks. Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know if I have an answer on the likelihood right now. What I will say is that we're not in support of that program and that it doesn't really fix the issue. I think that there are things about it that are slightly better than some versions of 421A, but as a whole, it does not solve the problem. It's yet another, tax break trade, which is simply not what we need. So yeah, I'm to be honest, not totally sure about the likelihood of passage, but I will say that we don't support it. And I will also say that I can't think of a tenant group that does. I think that it's a pretty universally understood to be not what we need for the city.
Yeah.
And for the state.
Yeah, for the record, CB5 passed a resolution last month opposing the 485W. My second question, if I'm allowed 2 questions, John, is probably more for Samuel. You mentioned in your presentation that one of the arguments from the developers is that the cost of land is prohibitive to develop rental, which there is some element of truth, but as you demonstrate, actually the 421A exacerbates this this issue. Do you have any thoughts, recommendations, or readings and great studies that you may have worked on that you can point us to start thinking about this issue? Because I think that for our neighborhood, our district, this is the most pressing issue and the biggest reason why we are having such a hard time developing affordable housing or keeping what already exists.
Yeah. So the second of the two reports that I put a link into has a discussion of this land price question and how 421A has pushed into it. And we look at the year 2016 for some useful evidence. 2016 was the year when 421A was allowed to expire. There was not agreement between the building trades unions and the Real Estate Board of New York over wage rates in new construction. And so the legislature basically refused to renew it until that agreement was made. And so it expired for a year. So you can go back to that year and say, okay, so what happened without 421A? And the developers look back at that year and they say there was a lot less development. That is true if you're comparing it to 2015, but 2015 was a crazy year where everybody tried to file all their permits because they knew that 421A might expire. So if you look at it based on previous years, 2016 looked a lot like 2012 and 2013 and 2014. But the other thing to note is that the rate of increase in the price of land went down in 2016 for the first time in a very long time. It's not like market prices crashed, but they were not accelerating at the pace that they were when everybody was getting 421A. And in fact, that was the year, the city had the most affordable housing starts of any previous year in the last decade. So there is some evidence that 421A is actually making it harder to build the kind of housing we need, even if it makes it easier to build the kind of very expensive housing most developers prefer. So all that is in the second report that we released, I think it was last week.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sam.
Great. Thanks. Marnie, you had your hand up? Hi.
Oh, hey, everybody. I'm just wondering, like, Charisma and Valerie from Housing Works, we attended a protest protesting the mayor's policy of the homeless encampment sweeps. And, one thing that Coalition on the Homeless cited that apparently there's like 2,000 vacant apartments in the city. And, here's Charisma, she needs an apartment. Like, it seems like everybody, like from what I learned at this protest, everybody does everything right. They do their paperwork right, but still there's no relief. So I guess I'm wondering from the group, is that if everybody does everything right, what is the best kind of like external pressure that they can exert to actually move this issue of, getting an apartment? I'm just wondering, like, what can we do externally to move an issue? I'm just wondering, like, what can they do? Because it just seems like they're doing everything right, and it was like really listed in detail what everybody's doing. People who are homeless and they're still not getting any relief. So I just wanted to put that question out there to everybody.
Marnie, it's still not getting any housing, right? When you say relief, basically, is what you're talking about.
Correct.
And when you say they're doing everything right, is filing the papers and vouchers and searching. Okay.
Yes, Charisma and Valerie can talk more about that, but it was really, really enumerated in detail, like all the steps and what everybody goes through, and still there's no relief. So if that's the case, and really it's systemic, and in my opinion, it's all done by design. What other things, what other external pressure can they do to actually get some kind of relief? Like, do they need to like camp out in front of, some, developer or even a nonprofit developer? Like, just like, what do they need to do? Because it just seems like they're doing everything, but the system is still not responding to them. Okay. So if that's the case, we need to think kind of outside the box.
Right. Panel, any thoughts? I know you do.
So I'll just say one thing that I just put in the chat, which is I think the vacancies that Marnie's referring to that Coalition mentioned at that protest, I put in a link to an op-ed about this. There are 2,500 units of supportive housing, specifically supportive housing, that are vacant. And I believe that the agencies are saying that the thing that's keeping them vacant is certainly not a lack of people who need it or have, as Marnie is saying, done all the right things to get it, but that the city isn't providing the promised funding for all the social workers and health workers that are required in supportive housing. That's what makes it supportive. And meanwhile, the Adams administration is basically rolling back the budgets for a lot of these agencies.
Mm-hmm. So it's a budgetary fight that we need to push for, is what you're, if I were to sum that up, right?
On that one specifically, on the 2,500 supportive housing units, my understanding is it's that the money isn't coming in to pay the workers to run those units.
Mm-hmm. Are they just sitting vacant, or are they just sitting vacant, right?
Correct.
Uh-huh. Do you have locations of all those supportive?
I don't offhand. It's possible that link that I put in the chat.
I have it.
I mean, a lot of supportive housing is fully occupied. Just to be clear, it's not like most of it is vacant, but there are vacancies, and they could cover a lot of folks who need services.
Absolutely. Elise, I look like.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, on top of that, that a lot of, I think sometimes we think about nonprofit developers or supportive housing as, separate from other types of for-profit, like these places don't evict people or whatever. But in fact, supportive housing, we end up seeing a lot of folks facing eviction from supportive housing units, specifically probably because of those lack of workers that are necessary to keep those places running in the way that's necessary. So I think that's just something, to keep in mind, that, that lack of workers is perpetuating this cycle of, folks having precarious housing and ending up homeless yet again. So I think that's just a really important thing to think about when we talk about supportive housing.
Yeah. Yeah. I find when they change these names, they rebrand it. Is that correct? Do you think they're rebranding it? Because when I see that, it's because it's gotten a lot of negative pushback. Is that what's happening here when they have the 421A, 421W? Is that possibly what they're doing, or am I wrong?
Yeah, and it's not a new tactic either. In 2017, when they renewed 421A, they called it Affordable New York as a rebranding, and now 485W is called Affordable Neighborhoods for New Yorkers. You can't call it 100% tax exemption on new luxury development, or else it doesn't get fit.
Yeah, I think we have to fight that term affordable, because it's what they call affordable. Again, most the median wage is 58, and then at that you're paying 30 to. I mean, this 30% idea of paying 30% of your income is all wrong. Back in the 80s, it was 23%. It's just and a developer was part of the raising that cap. We have to have our people grow, be able to save, be able to secure themselves in the future. So we have another hand. Rue, I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you all for that presentation. I just want to comment on a couple of things. One, supported housing. That inventory includes housing that is not yet built. Those beds the building is built, the apartments have been designated, but those beds are not ready for occupancy. Okay? Also, New York housing is completely different than affordable housing. Okay? It's not one and the same. The only time that the 421A and the supported housing cross is if it is a scatter site level 1 housing, okay? We also have to realize that that New York housing is also then split down into HASA supported housing, veteran supported housing, OMH supported housing, DV supported housing. There's a new model of safe haven beds that's more permanent, that's in that thing. And really, you can only really get a good idea of that is from the supported housing bed inventory at CUCS. So those numbers are very, very confusing when you ball them all together. Because what happens is the people that are looking for mental health supported housing go, 2,500 beds are available. No, that's not true. And I find that the system, the New York housing system, is efficient in finding the people who have the New York level 1, 2, and 3 housing needs, is very efficient in finding them housing, okay? The challenge that we're finding with working with other organizations are the people who have the city FEPS, the Fed VEPS, the emergency housing voucher, the standard Section 8, and the project-based Section 8, okay? That's where the real challenge lies. And I'm not sure who made the comment, but the voucher amount is the maximum amount that the voucher will pay for, but the person still pays 30% of their income, okay? And really what we have been looking at, Neighbors Together, the Assembly, and other organizations that are coming together just to share what they're working on, because we're all working on different aspects, is that it's really a stigma and a misunderstanding of that vouchers, okay, that landlords don't understand. They may have the vacancy. There's far more than 2,500 apartments available in the city. It's more like 30,000 available apartments. They either don't meet the rental or they have a stigma. The landlords, property managers, and realtors, there's a stigma about placing a voucher. And it stems from when the Advantage voucher was stopped. Landlords weren't notified and they stopped receiving money, so they don't trust the city anymore. The city acknowledges this. Also, a couple of our realtors have expressed that when they start placing city FEPs specifically and some Section 8, they get stigmatized within their own profession and they lose other market clients. So something that we're trying to work on is educating realtors about what a lot of realtors also don't know, that these vouchers, they get incentivized. They get the broker's fee. A lot of realtors and landlords don't realize that. So that's what we're working on, is education. The city is also working on this. Also, if anyone is currently holding a voucher, ask the person who set up your housing package to contact the PEU, because they have a city-run like Zillow. They explained it to me as a Zillow that the city has contracted with these landlords to place those vouchers, and there are apartments available in that system right now. But you just have to ask HRA or whoever prepared your housing package to look into that system and find someone to do it. All this, we can talk further if anyone wants to schedule a meeting or come to our housing meeting.
Thanks for, sounds like this is a whole big conversation in itself.
John, Charisma has her.
Yeah. Samuel, did you want to comment on that? Or
just that I appreciate the nuance. It is, it is complicated and there are multiple barriers to entry, but yeah, the key thing I want to reiterate is what Ruth said, which is 421A is a fairly separate issue and problem from the other vacancies and people having difficulty accessing housing through vouchers. They're both things we should be focused on.
Yeah, great. Lawrence, thanks for bringing that up. Charisma?
Yes.
Okay.
I wanted to know, the people making up these 421As and all these numbers, do anyone actually have boots on ground out here looking for an apartment as a voucher holder or anything like that? Because what Rue is saying is totally correct. It's a core, deeper problem. And we're not talking about supportive housing. We're just talking about housing as a human right.
Okay. Samuel, Lacey.
Yeah, I don't think the people who are writing these laws have boots on the ground looking for housing with a voucher. I mean, they to greater or lesser extent have roots in their communities, but they need to hear from you. So hopefully that's what groups like this can facilitate.
Okay, it's great. Anybody else want to comment on that? It's getting late, and of course we're going over, but let's talk through some actions maybe real quickly. Can we throw some actions out? Anybody have some thoughts on actions? Let's start. Anybody want to start? Elise, Sam? No, Elise?
Well, I mean, in terms of actions, we definitely love to see folks at our affordable housing leaders group. And also, you know, if we do have more events and protests or anything like that, we'll let you guys know. And I think we'll also definitely be doing more trying to get folks to call their legislator. So we'll pass along any info about that as it occurs.
Mm-hmm. Could we what Charisma was just saying, boots on the ground. I know we've got stories, and can we write? Is there a study focused on that? What we expect from our legislators, a letter or something? Because it sounds like they're not. They're viewing it from a political system, I guess, or a legislation is just, but they're not really on the ground. Are they meeting with a lot of people that are having these? Maybe we can compile these stories together. We certainly have some videos and so forth we could probably put together, and I'm sure you do too, right?
Yeah, so we have been meeting with legislators, and that's one of the things that our leaders group does, is that we have meetings to talk about this specific legislation. But I definitely do recommend, writing to your legislators as well, or if you are interested in being involved in those conversations, joining our group, specifically if you want to be talking about 421A or LIHTC or inclusionary housing. And yeah, if people have personal stories that they'd like us to pass along when we're having those meetings, once again, I'll drop my email in the chat, and I'm happy to pass them along to whatever legislators we talk to.
I talked about the rally planning that we have. Maybe this has to be part of one of the issues that we bring out in say, if we go to a new development, maybe the Hudson Yards or the Penn Station.
Yeah, if you're going to be at Hudson Yards is a pretty good picture of a building that got 421A and is not providing a lot of benefit to the city.
Right. Okay, good. Anybody else? Actions? Anybody? Larry?
I'll also say that I think there's going to be a citywide day of action on April 21st, which is 421. About 421A, assuming it doesn't get passed in the budget this year, which it doesn't look like it will.
Okay. Yeah, and that budget is being finished, so we don't have much time to really push for that, except maybe call. And I know Lisa's been sending out some call outs about that. Alex, any thoughts? Anybody?
Oh, I just wanted to quickly point out that there's a town hall about ending apartment warehousing. And most of you know that means when the landlord willfully just doesn't rent out the apartment to create artificial scarcity, etc. And that's on April 12th, 7 days from now at 6:30 p.m. And Gail Brewer, representing District 6, will be speaking about her bill to fight warehousing. And Linda Rosenthal from the New York State Assembly will be talking about her bill on the state level that does the same thing, I think.
Okay, so we probably need to wrap up. We can continue this conversation at a future date. I don't know where the next agenda lies at the moment offhand, but any new, Josie, I think you were a new person on here. Did you want to say anything at all?
Well, it did occur to me that like my local representative, I believe, is Brad Holman. So I know where he stands. I want to find a way to convince the people who need convincing. Do we just go straight to the state? Do we just, rather than contacting our local representative, should we be contacting Governor Hochul? Just something that goes to the people who have power. I mean, because I'm just a resident. I'm not a part of any group or agency or advocacy group, although, you know, I would love to be. But that's where my mind is going. How to reach the people who need convincing.
Good question. Josie, send me your specific interest and I'll see who I can put you with. And then, of course, we're looking to develop committees. So anybody have an answer for Josie? Elise?
Yes. So I think, you know, for those of us who are luckily in districts where our representatives are supportive, or even the sponsors of the legislation, one place that stuff often gets stuck is in the housing committee. So, you know, reaching out to, for the assembly, it's Chair Simbrowitz, and blanking on who it is for the Senate right now. And then I would also just say, the speaker of each of those bodies. And then, yes, the governor obviously has the ultimate power on these things. So that, and then also, I mean, I think it's fine to contact representatives who are not in your district. They might not listen to you as much, but I think the volume of calls is still important.
My name is Keitha. I work with an organization called the Ladies of Hope Ministries. I manage the Angel Food Project. We also have some supportive housing in the Bronx, and we're opening up some supportive housing in other states.
Oh, great. Do you have any spaces available?
At the moment, I believe we might have one space available in the Bronx.
Okay.
Our transitional home or supportive housing is available for women only. Our organization supports women. Okay,
great. Yeah, and just let me know in the chat or whatever, and I'll make sure that word gets out. There's a lot of people here probably are looking for spaces. We're always.
Yeah, I believe we have one. I can put my email in the chat if anyone wants to speak offline.
So thanks again for a wonderful meeting.